Terminator Resistance is a new video game developed by Polish studio Teon and published by Reef Entertainment. Now, you'd be forgiven for assuming that Terminator Resistance is a rushed cash grab movie tie-in released to coincide with the new film Terminator Dark Fate, but it would appear that actually the timing is largely coincidental, because this game has nothing to do with Dark Fate. Instead, it's based on the future war scenes from Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. For most people, the announcement of this game came out of nowhere, because they first heard about it in September this year. But it wasn't a surprise to me, because I read news reports about Reef Entertainment buying the video game rights to the first two Terminator films all the way back in 2013, when they announced that they were planning on having Teon develop a game based on those movies called Terminators, the video game. This was just a few months before they released Rambo, the video game, a game based on the first three Rambo movies. So it seems like someone decided, I love 80s and 90s action movies, let's buy the license to make games based on those films. Now, their Rambo video game was an on-rails shooter, like Time Crisis, with some quick-time events thrown in. And it wasn't very successful. But ever since then, it would appear that Teon has spent the last 6 years working on a proper Terminator first-person shooter. And what's more, it's also a stealth game and a role-playing game. I've combed through all the articles, press releases, screenshots and videos, and I've been able to piece together quite a bit of info about the game. The game starts off in 2028, which is actually a year earlier than the future war scenes in Terminator 1 and 2. You play as Private Jacob Rivers in the Pacific Division of the Human Resistance. At the start of the game, your squad mates are wiped out by a mysterious new foe. For some reason, Skynet is sending its fancy new T-800 cyborg infiltrators after you, the sort that have living flesh over an endoskeleton.
You've been targeted for termination.
So Skynet must know somehow that you're destined for great things. While searching for other resistance fighters, you stumble upon a group of civilian survivors, and together you set out on a dangerous journey across post-apocalyptic Los Angeles, a bit like Metro Exodus. This eventually leads to you coming to the attention of Resistance South Division's Commander Baron, and under her leadership, you'll learn how to wield Techcom's arsenal to take the fight back to Skynet. The developers have called the game a prequel to the first film, because the plot is supposed to get us to the moment where Skynet sends a Terminator back in time to kill Sarah Connor, and John Connor sends Kyle Reese back to protect her. The announcement trailer actually has a recreation of a scene from Terminator 2, and makes it pretty clear that by the end of the game, we'll be taking orders from John Connor himself.
I want you to take a team of my soldiers and fight your way to Skynet's defense grid.
I love that they've got those old-style computers and radar and other equipment. They've also got the right uniforms for the Resistance, and there are sci-fi plasma guns based on Valma M82 assault rifles, which were used as the basis for the plasma gun props in the first movie. It reminds me of how the game Alien Isolation imitated the props and set design of the first Alien film, and made sure nothing looked too modern for 70s sci-fi. They've nailed the look and feel of the Terminator post-apocalypse. We never got any daytime future war scenes, at least not until Terminator Salvation, so the developers have got free rein to make daytime scenes look however they want. But in the night scenes and the underground scenes, everything's got that distinctive blue hue. And the music and the sound effects sound exactly right as well. The energy blasts and musical stings really evoke that 80s and 90s sci-fi feel. A bit like Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, but more subtle and subdued. Here's a quote from the game's producer. When developing the game, we knew that authentically recreating the future war scenario was key for fans, so we put a lot of effort into analysing the short glimpses we get of the future in Terminator and Terminator 2, in order to bring those environments and details to the game as closely as possible. The Best example of this is the Resistance shelter, which is seen in the first Terminator. Also, the Resistance uniforms are recreated with a lot of attention to detail. We really hope Terminator fans will enjoy lovingly crafted touches such as these in the game.
Come on. Where are the others? Where's the rest of the Resistance? I don't know.
On the 1st of November, a video was released showing 10 minutes of gameplay from the early parts of the game. In it, your squad mates have already been killed, and endoskeletons are terminating the civilians that you're there to protect. Now, hold up 1 minute. Terminator fans are bound to be wondering, what's with that red plasma gun? In the first two movies, all the energy weapons were pink or purple. For some reason, Terminator 3, and the Sarah Connor Chronicles TV series, changed the plasma bolts to blue. And the TX in Terminator 3 fired yellow plasma blasts. And in Terminator Salvation there were machines of yellow plasma guns as well. But Terminator Genesis had the good sense to make them purple again. So what's with Terminator Resistance having red energy weapons? I've already seen lots of angry comments online saying Terminator Future War means purple lasers, they couldn't even get that bit right. Well, on the 19th of October, PlayStation Access streamed half an hour of gameplay from the London EGX Game Expo, and in that it can be seen that red plasma is used by first generation phased plasma rifles.
Phased plasma rifle in the 40-watt range.
Hey, just what you see, pal.
And while searching for Terminator Resistance screenshots, I found this. Violet plasma cells for second generation phased plasma rifles. Now, remember I said the game starts a year before the end of the war? They've made it so that over the course of the game, plasma weaponry will become more advanced. And by the time we get to the final stages of the war, in 2029, both Skynet and the Resistance will have switched to second generation phased plasma guns that fire purple energy bolts. Now, that's actually very similar to how Bethesda did things in Future Shock and its sequel Skynet back in the 90s. Yes, at the same time that Bethesda was making the early Elder Scrolls games, and long before they made Fallout 3, they made Terminator first-person shooters. And in those games, there were two types of energy weapon, red and blue. You got to use Kyle Reese's rifle from the first film, complete with a high-tech electronic scope. Except Bethesda called that weapon a laser rifle, and had it fire red beams. They also included the heavy weapon used by the Terminator that infiltrates the Resistance base, and they called that a laser cannon. Later you could get your hands on phased plasma weapons. They were more powerful and more energy efficient, but had a slower rate of fire. There was a plasma pistol, plasma rifle, and a phased plasma cannon, and they all fired blue energy blasts. There were also enemies that fired green plasma. I guess Bethesda wanted the energy weapons to have a bit of variety and not all be the same colour. And Terminator Resistance is basically doing the same thing, having two different colours of energy weapons, with red being the weaker variant. This also explains why they've added obvious glowing parts to the rifles carried by the Terminator endoskeletons. It's so that at a glance you can tell whether an enemy is armed with a moderately dangerous red plasma gun, or an even deadlier violet plasma gun. Anyway, that's enough about red and purple lasers. Let's get back to talking about the start of the game. Someone takes down the endoskeleton that's about to murder you, and a voice on the radio tells you how to escape to safety. You have to flee through the ruins, pursued by T-800 endoskeletons and aerial hunter-killers. But you've got no way to fight back, because, true to the movies, Terminators are bulletproof. In the PlayStation Access video, there's a loading screen that explicitly says that standard weapons cannot damage Terminators. The game's producer has said that until you get plasma weapons, you need to avoid Terminators or knock them down with a shotgun, and then use that moment to escape. So in the early stages of the game, encounters with Terminators are about running like hell or using stealth. Before long, you'll come across some civilian survivors, and that's when the game becomes a bit more of a role-playing game. You'll get dialogue choices for how you want to interact with these characters.
You're from the Resistance. See, Patrick? He's going to help us.
No, they're going to get us.
Please, you need to help me. My little brother, he just won't listen.
I'm not going. Leave me alone. I said leave me alone.
I know you're scared, but staying here is not an option. I'll protect you and your sister, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer, by the way.
According to the game's producer, we believe that in the Terminator universe the characters are as important as the combat itself. So we created a cast of characters of intriguing backstories that the player will have a chance to learn if they're willing to. Gaining their trust will be crucial, because that impacts how each of their stories ends. The PlayStation Access video shows that later in the game you'll have a mission in a hospital, and while there you can complete an optional side quest to find antibiotics for someone named Erin. One of the ways to complete this side quest is to do some lockpicking, similar to what you'd find in recent Fallout games, and that'll let you break into the back of an ambulance. When it comes to high-tech doors and laser fences, you'll need to do some computer hacking. Rather than Fallout-style word games, you play a minigame similar to Frogger. You can also hack stuff like automated turrets to make them allies. If you hack a plasma turret, then you can use it to destroy Terminators, even if you don't have any plasma guns of your own yet. Picking locks, hacking computers, destroying enemies, and completing quests all earn you experience points that let you level up and improve your skills. Here you can see the combat skill tree, which includes stealth, weapons, and explosives, but there are also other skill trees for science and survival. As well as boosting your stats, improving your skills can also unlock new abilities, such as disarming and collecting enemy laser traps.
Spider scouts ahead. Keep that gun ready. Or sneak past them if you don't want to engage.
As mentioned earlier, at the start of the game you've no way of fighting Terminators, but it doesn't mean that the early stages are devoid of combat. Terminators are a relatively recent Skynet creation, and there are loads of less formidable robots prowling the wasteland. These little robot spider scouts can be destroyed with just a few bullets from a standard pistol, and they're not very dangerous, they only have a weak electrical zap attack. However, the voice on the radio advises you that you might prefer to sneak past these enemies rather than fighting them, and at the top of the screen there's a detection meter that lets you know whether an enemy is about to spot you. A little later, you'll get an Uzi submachine gun.
The Uzi 9mm.
You know your weapons, buddy. Any one of these is ideal for home defense.
And eventually, you'll get a Remington pump-action shotgun and an M16 assault rifle. From the inventory screen, it looks like you can have at least 3 weapons equipped at one time, possibly even 4 weapons. And you also get 2 other slots, one for equipping offensive items, such as grenades or pipe bombs, and the other for defensive items, such as medkits. Now, the Uzi, pump-action shotgun and M16 rifle were all weapons in those 90s Bethesda Terminator games. But that's no surprise, given that they were weapons used in the first movie, either by Carl Reese or the Terminator. So if you're trying to pick appropriate Terminator-inspired weaponry, it makes sense to go with those. It's great to see that Teon have followed in Bethesda's footsteps. They haven't included modern weapons like a G36 or an MP7. Even though this game is set in the future, it's supposed to be the future imagined in the 80s, so the real-world weapons are those known about back then. One weird thing though, is that just like Future Shock and Skynet, none of the bullet weapons in Terminator Resistance appear to eject shell casings. That's been a standard feature of FPS games ever since Half-Life 1. It's hard to imagine that's just some kind of oversight. Could it be intentional? Is it a homage to Bethesda's old Terminator games? Well, in the 80s, Heckler & Koch developed the G11, an assault rifle that used caseless ammunition, and many people thought that was going to be the future of bullet weaponry. 2 years after the Terminator, James Cameron's film Aliens had rifles that supposedly used caseless ammo. So perhaps Teon have gone with bullet weapons using caseless ammo as part of their 80s vision of what the future might be like. Once you've gotten the Uzi, you'll start to come up against tougher enemies, like these armoured spiders that shoot dual machine guns. They're not completely bulletproof like a Terminator, but it looks like it can take nearly 100 bullets to destroy one. However, enemies have weak points, and hitting them will score a critical hit. Finding cover and targeting those weak points is crucial to success. Damaged robots catch fire and give off smoke, and apparently your bullets can actually tear off components and pieces of armour, which is a nice touch. If you destroy robots, rather than sneaking past them, then you can loot their wreckage for useful resources, for trading or crafting. But this game doesn't have regenerating health, you need to use medkits, so if you choose to fight every machine you come across, you might end up short on health when you actually need it. In this fight, the player is nicely rewarded with a haul of loot from the destroyed robot, but the player ended up needing to use several medkits. If you want to sneak past enemies, one useful tool you have is ultravision, special night vision goggles that also let you see robots through walls. If you aim at a robot in ultravision, then it scans them and gives you useful information, such as their health and what weapon they're armed with. This is actually consistent with the technology seen in the first film. The scope on Kyle Reese's gun can target, scan and lock onto enemies. The female soldier who fights alongside Kyle wears high-tech goggles with glowing green screens. And in Terminator 2, we see one of John Connor's men has glowing green goggles. The one limitation of ultravision is that you can't run while using it. It seems very useful in the hospital mission, where you have to sneak past several T-800 endoskeletons. If you're spotted by a T-800, that will probably result in instant death, as it takes barely a moment for them to kill you with their plasma guns.
I may run. I'm just gonna run. I'm running. Okay. I am dead.
It looks like there might be a way for stealthy players to eliminate Terminators, using some kind of electrified knife. In the Sarah Connor Chronicles TV series, electrocuting a Terminator can disable it for several seconds. And if you're quick, you can then use a knife to prise open a port on its metal skull and pull out its brain chip. But whether Terminator Resistance will ever be performing the same kind of Terminator takedown is guesswork, as there hasn't been any footage of this fancy knife in action. The map screen suggests that exploration is going to be quite a big part of the game, and it might even be open world to some degree. The key on the map screen mentions main objectives, side objectives, safe houses, crafting tables, trading points, and destructible walls. There's also the option to add your own custom markers to the map. So it looks like there's multiple ways to get through areas, such as lockpicking, hacking, or blowing up walls. And as well as ammo and medkits, you can also find trading resources and materials for crafting. So in many ways, it looks like the game is shaping up to be Fallout 4 Terminator Edition. Although this next guy looks like he's straight out of Half-Life 2.
I know that Colin wants us to go, but I don't know how I feel about leaving anyone behind. Jennifer just got here. And you said yourself that you heard someone on the radio. There could be other people out there. Don't you think somebody should go and look for them? I mean, you're from the Resistance. It's your call.
So far, all the dialogue choices and side quests appear to be a choice between being nice or being a jerk. The obvious choice here is to say yes, you'll look for survivors. Firstly, because it's the more moral thing to do. And secondly, because it will make this guy Ryan happy and trust you more. And thirdly, well, would you really want to skip side quests and miss out on content?
I'll search for other survivors.
Good, I'll get the bus ready.
You'll end up having to search several buildings, but most of them have no one inside.
Anyone there? No one's here.
However, you can grab a few trade resources. In modern Fallout games, you can end up with an inventory full of paperweights and coffee cups and tinned food to barter with. But in Terminator Resistance, food and drink and miscellaneous valuables are just called trade resources and are added to your inventory as currency. Easy money. You move from house to house and eventually you can find at least one survivor, but finding them means getting past loads of killer robots, including a dangerous armoured spider.
Is anyone here? Nothing.
So you might decide that earning Ryan's respect and getting a few trade resources isn't worth risking your life, and instead you're better off being pragmatic and telling him that it's too risky, and that it's better if you all leave now. I wonder if there'll be any side quests where you can be a jerk and screw people over, and whether there are any decent rewards for doing that. or situations where two characters will want things that conflict with each other, so you'll need to choose who to help out and who to make unhappy. The game is supposed to have multiple endings.
Anyone in here?
Who's there?
Once you've searched for survivors, you'll return to Ryan and Jennifer and the others, and find that they're fighting off a load of robots, including flying scout drones and another armoured spider. The objective, repel the Skynet attack, is actually a part of the More Survivors mission. So it turns out that by delaying everyone leaving so you could look for more survivors, you've actually put everyone at risk. Eventually, you all leap onto an old school bus and escape, beginning your journey to find the rest of the Resistance and a new home for these civilians.
Go, go, go!
Now, that's not everything this game has to offer. It turns out there's a couple of other surprising features. If you check out the game's Steam store page, it has a mature content description. This product contains frequent violence and bad language. There are scenes of nudity, sexual content, and some gore. Nudity and sexual content, that's a surprise. And the game's PEGI rating is 16, due to violence, bad language, and sex. So I looked the game up on the PEGI website, and it says, this game has received a PEGI 16 because it features sustained depictions of violence towards human characters, strong violence, use of strong language, depictions of erotic nudity, and depictions of sexual intercourse without visible genitals. Wow! The game also has an ESRB rating of mature 17+. The ESRB website has quite a detailed and exciting description of the game. This is a first-person shooter in which players assume the role of Private Jacob Rivers as he battles Skynet in a post-apocalyptic future. Players complete military missions using a variety of weapons, e.g. machine guns, shotguns, laser rifles, rocket launchers, explosives, to kill/destroy Terminators, robotic drones, and enemy war machines. Battles are frenetic with realistic gunfire and large explosions. A handful of sequences depict large blood-stained environments and/or corpses lying in large pools of blood. Cutscenes depict additional acts of violence, a man executed by a gunshot to the head, a Terminator holding and shooting a man at close range. 2 sequences depict characters engaging in sexual activity from a first-person perspective. Moaning and heavy breathing sounds can be heard as the camera focuses on characters' facial expressions. No breasts or genitalia are depicted. And then it mentions the swear words in the game. So, it's not just the case that at some point we might walk in on a couple having sex. It seems that if you make certain choices in the game, your character can actually have first-person sex sequences.
Do you think love can bloom even on a battlefield?
Yeah, I do. I think at any time, any place, people can fall in love with each other. But if you love someone, you have to be able to protect them.
I think so too.
The ESRB rating mentioned blood-stained environments and corpses. This brings me on to another surprising feature of the game. During the hospital mission, there's actually a cameo by Robert Patrick, the actor who played the T-1000 from Terminator 2. Or at least his likeness. It would appear that Skynet based the default appearance of the shape-shifting Terminator on a resistance soldier who was captured and experimented upon. This could mean there's a small possibility of Arnold Schwarzenegger's likeness appearing in the game, either as an actual Terminator or as a human whose likeness Skynet stole. I've not got my hopes up too high on that one though. It's hard to imagine they keep big news like that under wraps, but who knows? Terminator Resistance is shortly due for release in Europe on the 15th of November for PC, Xbox One and PS4. In Australia, it's out the 22nd of November, and oddly enough Americans have to wait until December 10th, almost a month after the European release. I think that might only apply to the console versions though. I'm pretty sure the Steam PC release is 15th November no matter where you are. Over the decades there's been a few decent Terminator games, and plenty of rubbish ones. The good ones tended to come out between movies, rather than coinciding with them, such as the Terminator Mega CD game 2 years after Terminator 2, Future Shock and Skynet a couple of years later, and Terminator 3 The Redemption a year after Terminator 3. Teyon might be a small developer with a small budget, but they started work on this game a couple of years before Terminator Genisys, and they spent so long on it that another film has come out, and they've not rushed development to have it coincide with that either. With that level of passion and commitment to making a good experience, I'm excited to see their vision of the Terminator Future War.